think for most of you, it's probably 9 a.m., but here in Cologne, it's 1 a.m. So it's in the middle of the night, actually. So sorry if I come across tired. But yeah, let's get started. So this is the first presentation of this conference. So I will start off gentle with a short introduction about myself. And so this is the outline. First, I will give you an overview of the project. Then I will talk a little bit about the concepts of acceptance, perception, artificial intelligence, and then I will come to the study, so the paper that I submitted to the conference, and I will finish off with a short summary. So I'm currently working at the Chair of Communication Science at RWTH Aachen in Germany. Before that, I studied psychology at the Tilburg University and graduated with a Bachelor of Psychology. Then I went on to pursue my master's degree in philosophy at the University of Edinburgh, and now I'm working under the Visual Project, which is a Marie Skłodowska-Curie funded project, also funded by the European Union. And we are developing visually based ambient assistive technologies, which help older and frail people in their homes. So what is acceptance of AI? Why do we need acceptance? Basically, acceptance is a multifaceted variable, but it's also highly connected to the concept of perception. So what people think of, for example, AI or AI-based technologies, what attitudes and associations they have regarding AI. It's important to know who to target with these technologies, including handicapped people, the general public, but also the medical personnel, so doctors, nurses, and the like. We consider the importance of the location, so where the camera systems or video-based AL technologies will be installed in the context of a home or a care home. And of course, the assessment of the perception attitudes is important. So the goal of the Visual Project is to collect knowledge about the associations, attitudes toward AI. My project is concerned with the development of an acceptance scale or cartography in order to gain more insights into into a holistic framework of the users and the context and their requirements. The relevance of this research is because there is a need for an acceptance cartography of AI, because there's a lot of research out there about AI in general, but in this particular context of ambient assisted living technologies, the concept of AI is not yet that well understood. And we need users' perspectives in the development of these technologies to grant a sufficient and efficient implementation in all sectors of society. So what is acceptance? Well, today I'm going to talk about technology acceptance and not acceptance in general. You can see technology acceptance as consisting of 27 factors. Which can be subdivided into 6 themes. So there are the concerns, expectations, need, alternatives, and social influence, as well as characteristics of users. All of these play a role in the acceptance process, so in the adoption behavior of a certain technology, in my case, AI-based technology. And they might even interact with one another. So needs might interact with expectations, might interact with concerns, social influence, and so on and so forth. So as I said, acceptance can also be seen as user adoption behavior. So does the user of the technology actually use it? Is it a technology that is acceptable and that will be perceived as something useful, and that will also be perceived as easy to use? So is it accessible to the user and the stakeholder? So how is this perception constituted? What does perception mean in this context? So there was a study by Fast and Horvitz from 2017, and they conducted a long-term trend analysis of the public representation in the New York Times. So they analyzed a text corpora of 30 years of New York Times articles in which they tried to find what people wrote or what themes emerged about the topic of artificial intelligence. What they found is that there was or is general interest and awareness about AI since the term was coined in 1955 or 1956 during the Dartmouth College on artificial intelligence. And they also find an increased interest in AI after the year 2009. I will come back to this point later on in my talk. But for the moment, we can say that these two researchers found that the discussion in the New York Times for the 30-year period was mostly optimistic rather than pessimistic, but that specific concerns emerged along the way. And these concerns also appeared in my own research on the topic. And they relate to loss of control over AI. So concerns about general AI that might get too uncontrollable or intransparent. It relates to ethical concerns for AI and negative impact of AI on the work and society in general. So what is AI? There are probably a lot of people here who have a very detailed answer to this question. But when I ask lay people, so when I ask my friends or colleagues from a different field, what they say when I ask what is AI, usually I get the answer artificial intelligence. This is a very obvious but also quite interesting answer, because of course it's what one hears in the media, what one hears in movies, and so on and so forth. So it's a natural reaction to the question. Some people know that AI is related to machine learning, and I think we have a lot of researchers here who are researching the field of machine learning or working in the field of machine learning. AI is also sometimes related to statistics. Of course, there are a lot of people who think AI is a robot or AI is the Terminator. Autonomous cars, computer science, pattern recognition. These are all fields in which AI can be implemented. The Terminator is a fictional field, although some people might argue that it's a foreseeable future, but I will come back to this point later on. So what then is AI? Is it a robot? Is it a drone? Is it a self-driving car? Is it everything? We asked this question in a small group of people as a preliminary study in order to find what angle we can use to assess the knowledge and expectations of AI. So we conducted a short survey and asked people exactly that. What is AI? Based on these pictures. What we found was that 90% of people thought the robot was definitely AI, and 0% thought that the old VW, which is featured in the Shining novel, that this was AI. And it's understandable. The robot looks like something that might be innovative and exotic, and the VW mostly looks like something that is old and not so innovative. So does it mean that AI is something innovative and shiny and clean? Or is it somewhere in between the robot and the old car? As a matter of fact, there's a lot of things and a lot of definitions about AI. So some say the people who coined the term, McCarthy, Minsky, Rochester, and Shannon, thought of AI as a way to approach human intelligence, which is also in line with Copeland's definition of the ability of a computer to perform actions commonly associated with human intelligence. For Murphy and his colleagues, AI is the field of science in which we develop technologies that display certain cognitive tasks in an intelligent manner. So it's not an ability, but it's a field of science, and it's about technology. But for example, the European Commission, an essential feature of AI is the large amounts of data. And algorithms which can be trained on these data sets in order to achieve desired or sometimes also undesired outcomes. So to come now to the study at hand, it's called a qualitative approach to the public perception of artificial intelligence, and it was set up as an explorative study in order to find common themes about what people might know, expect, and are in contact with AI. Therefore, we developed a semi-structured interview protocol and conducted this study over a period of 3 months. We used a sample of 32 participants, 70 females and 16 males, with the research aim to find out what do people know about AI, what contact do people have or had with AI, and what do people expect of AI. The interview guideline was based on existing literature, so we conducted a thorough literature search in order to develop the open-ended questions and also specific questions about specific context, different AI technologies, and different stakeholder groups. After the interviews were conducted and audio recorded, we subsequently transcribed them, and the transcripts were thematically analyzed. So they were analyzed by gathering common themes, and these themes included, as I said before, some themes about loss of control, privacy issues, and data privacy issues, which is a separate issue from privacy, because for some people, being exposed by having their blinds open is a different matter from being exposed by having their bank details leaked on the internet. Then people talked a lot about advantages and disadvantages of AI, and of course the difference between an AI-based technology and a technology that isn't based on artificial intelligence. What we found was that a lot of people knew what AI was. So we had a lot of experts who directly associated AI with machine learning and deep convolutional neural networks, and but other people who were laypersons in this discussion either had one of 2 points of view. So one was the dystopian view. So as I said before, some people associated AI with the Terminator, which is somewhat of an exaggerated fear if you are in the topic of AI, but I think it's a common reaction to the lay person. And for those of you who do not know the Terminator scenario, it's a movie series in which there is a company who develops robots based on artificial intelligence. And in the movie series, these robots take over the world and try to rid the world of the human race. So the robots take over the humans, and this might be an exaggerated fear when we talk about the kind of AI that we have today. In contrast to that was the utopian view, and this was about an unrealistic expectation about what AI can and cannot do. So there were people who described AI as the perfect tool, something that is infallible and that will always outperform the human mind and the human cognitive capacity. To illustrate that point, we have two quotes from the interviews I would like to read to you. So the first one is about the dystopian view, and it reads, I quote, "It should definitely not be able to program itself. Power of the machines and whatnot. If you have watched Terminator, you surely wouldn't want that. If it is intelligent and develops a personality with own interests, like I do not like asparagus, for example, this would be a problem." So this was one person who definitely had the direct association of AI with the Terminator, and therefore was strictly opposed to the idea that AI could one day be integrated into their home. In contrast to that, there was this other participant, and they said that, well, an AI can do it perfectly. Some things human can't. It is what it is. These many facets could not be represented by the human mind, let alone summarized in such a way that gives you a perfect output. Evidently, humans can't. And in this case, the person thought that AI was infallible. And I will come back to the point why neither of these views is a sufficient driver for a useful acceptance of AI-based technologies. So why is this relevant? Why does this even matter in a society where technology is developed on a daily basis, and new ideas are being developed every minute of the day? So last year, the European Commission revised the Coordinated Plan on Artificial Intelligence. It is basically just a plan that lays out goals and potential pitfalls of development in the topic of artificial intelligence. And they set some goals and recommendations, among which is the key policy to ensure that AI works for people and is a force of good in society. Also, or let's say, however, the European Commission acknowledges that some people, or the general public as they put it, might not be able to fully understand the workings and effects of AI systems. And this is based on the AI ethics guidelines of the European Commission and not the report itself. So what? Well, where do we go from here? Why should people, or would people accept AI or AI-based technologies for that matter? Well, first, people must know that something exists in order to accept it. You cannot say, I like AI, or I think AI is a good thing, and you don't know what it is or that it even exists. If it's just a term you throw around, it's something abstract and not something you can really approach and say, okay, this is something that I want in my home. Second, the technology obviously has to be useful. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense to implement it anywhere. Easily accessible is another criterion for the acceptance to work, and it has to provide an addition to an otherwise less efficient type of work. So if you develop something that is shiny, that looks good, that maybe sells good, but is a less efficient type to what you already have, then the acceptance most certainly will be less than when it is an actual addition to something. So what we have is the usefulness, accessibility, and general benefits of the technology that we try to develop. As for the research directions, it is argued that the general public is an important stakeholder, because it is the general public that will implement and adopt the technology and that will live and work with the technology on a daily basis. Therefore, it is them who we need to consider, and there remains a need for updated insights into the public perception, because technologies develop very fast and very differently across different domains and also across different cultures. So the first step in the development of an acceptance cartography is to try to find out common themes, common variables, and general context in which we try to do the research that we do. So future studies need to take these other variables into account. We need to consider different stakeholders, so not just the general public, but also the expert groups, the developers, the lawyers, the policymakers, and so on. And we also need to add additional contexts and take them into account. To sum up, all the participants in the study have heard about the term AI, which is also a good thing. Some know what it is, others do not. And those who did not know what it is either had dystopian or utopian views, so exaggerated fears or exaggerated expectations about AI. Both might impact the adoption behavior, so the acceptance of the AI-based technology. And neither leads to an efficient or a good adoption behavior. Thus, the information, education, and accessibility is needed. So we need to communicate what AI is in an accessible manner, and to inform what it actually is that AI can and cannot do and will be able to do. So these variables, obviously, since this is an extremely small sample and we used a qualitative study design, need to be quantitatively investigated. So we need to increase the sample size in order to make generalizable claims about the nature of this acceptance cartography. Obviously, this needs to be done with different stakeholder groups in different contexts, also different cultural contexts, with different AI-based technologies, because there's a lot of AI-based technology out there. And this brings me to the end of my talk, and I would like to end this talk with a quote, which I would like to read to you. So, in considering any new subject, there's frequently a tendency, first, to overrate what we find to be already interesting and remarkable, and secondly, by a sort of natural reaction, to undervalue the true state of the case when we do discover that our notions have surpassed those that were really tenable. And it is a quote by Ada Lovelace about Charles Babbage's analytical engine. It was the pre-runner of what we might nowadays call artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander Hick, for this well-presented contribution. Is there any questions for Mr. Hick?
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much. The presentation is remarkable. And if you don't mind, is there any prediction about the future of AI? Can you shed a little bit light on this? Thank you.
So the question is if there's, thank you for the nice feedback. And the question is if there's prediction about the future of AIL technologies. Did I get that right?
Yes, please.
So as of today, I can say that there's already a lot of AIL, so ambient assisted living technology out there. There are fall detection sensors such as the Cogvis sensor, which is a depth-based camera system. So it operates using RGB depth sensor and I think also thermal sensor and merging them into composite pictures. So it's privacy preserving. And this is already implemented in some care facilities, for example, in Austria. As for any other visual-based camera technologies, it's quite difficult because of the privacy issues that go along with camera-based systems. In our project, we try to adapt the privacy by design principle, so that the privacy is ensured from the start on, so there won't be any recognition of a person in the pictures. So I'm not really sure that I know the exact future that this might take, but the project that we are working on is quite promising at the moment.